Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Really quick before we get started, we'd love to hear what state you guys are from. So if you wouldn't mind going down to the questions panel down below and putting through what state you're in, just so we can kind of see how much of the country that we're covering. It'd be great to hear from you guys. So my name is Katie Starr, and I am with the Standlee Premium Western Forage marketing team. Standlee Premium Western Forage is a family-owned business located in southern Idaho with ideal growing conditions to raise some of the best quality forage in the country. We're here to serve you and your animals with consistent, high-quality nutrition and valuable education to keep them happy and healthy. So really quick, let's see where we have people from. I think we had somebody from Texas, Michigan, Illinois, Oregon. Awesome. We're kind of getting a nice little spread across the country. Oklahoma, Minnesota, Arizona. How awesome. Thanks, everybody. So welcome to our educational webinar titled The Power of Forage, the Importance of Feeding the Gut Microbiome in Horses. Understanding basic horse digestion is critical for us to provide our horses with the best feed regimen possible. Studying the gut microbiome in humans has been very cutting-edge research, and equine nutritionists are excited about what they are learning regarding the gut bacteria in horses and how it can affect everyday living for them. So this webinar won't provide all the answers, mainly because no one has all of the answers yet. But what they're learning is fascinating, and that's what we're going to be sharing with you guys today. And just based off of some past feedback that we've had, attendees have requested to go a little bit longer to get more time for their questions. So with this one, there's so much information, there is a possibility that we could go over our time just a little bit. And instead of rushing through it, leaving out information, or cutting short the Q&A time, we wanted to be able to give you as much of the picture as we can. If you don't like it or you do like it, just let us know in the follow-up survey at the end. So if you happen to be new to joining our webinars, we'll take just a minute to go over a few items so that you're comfortable with viewing and participating in our webinar. If you're viewing this as a recording, feel free to skip over this section. And as a heads up, we'll have just a couple poll questions throughout the webinar that will pause the presentation for you to answer. And we'll also be giving away some free product coupons at the end of the webinar, so hopefully you can stay with us till the end. We have taken a screenshot of an example of the attendee interface, and you should see something that looks like this on your own computer desktop in the upper right corner. Clicking on the red box with the white arrow allows you to open and close the control panel anytime you'd like during the presentation. You're listening in using your computer speaker system by default. If you would prefer to join over the phone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed for you. You will also have an opportunity to submit questions that you have via text to today's presenter by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. Please feel free to send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. Depending on how many questions that come in, we may not be able to address all of them within our time frame, but we'll certainly use them for future nutritional pieces and connect with you one-on-one if you reach out to us. We've also attached a quick fact sheet associated with today's webinar that you can download from the control panel under handouts. For those viewing this as a recording, go to StanleyForage.com under Nutrition and Nutritional Resources to find the handout titled The Importance of Your Horse's Gut Microbiome. This is a great take-home piece for this webinar. Our educational content is also kind of tucked in on our website, so I wanted to actually show you a screenshot of our website and where you can find some helpful educational content that we have here under Nutritional Resources, including past webinars that we've recorded, other nutritional white papers, and more. So that's all I have from an introductory standpoint, and I would like to welcome Dr. Tania Cubitt with Performance Horse Nutrition, who serves as one of our Standlee Premium Western Forage equine nutritionists. She has a PhD in equine nutrition and reproduction. So with that, I will go ahead and let Dr. Cubitt share just a little more about herself before she begins the presentation.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you all for joining us in this webinar. I'm really excited about this topic. As Katie said, we really aren't going to answer all of the questions that you have, but we're learning so much, and I just think it's really a hot topic in equine nutrition today, as it is in human nutrition and other livestock as well. People always ask me, what's the latest in equine nutrition? And oftentimes I don't have a good answer because there's nothing new coming out. But right now we have some really cool stuff to share with you. So without further ado, we will keep going. So we'll touch on first digestion. We're not going to go through the digestive system as we have in other webinars, but we're just going to point out what we already know. Then we're going to take a little closer look at the equine gut microbiome. And in particular, we want to look at the things that affect the horse's gut microbiome, and then in turn, what things can the horse's microbiome affect, whether it be obesity, inflammation, immune function, behavior. And then to wrap it all up, right now, some of the management tools that we know we can use to better that gut microbiome. So I just want to start out with the basics. We know that horses are non-ruminant herbivores. They're meant to graze all day long. We call them hindgut fermenters because all of their digestion really occurs in their hindgut, in their cecum, small, large colon. This hindgut is full of a complex group of microbes and yeast, and we'll get into that a little bit later on. But those microbes are adept at breaking down high fiber diets and degrading those into energy and nutrients that the horse can absorb for health and maintenance. So we know that. We know the parts of the digestive system. We know that the foregut is made up of the stomach and the small intestine, and the food moves relatively quickly throughout these two sections. We know the stomach is full of acid, the small intestine has enzymes for digestion. And then when we get to the hindgut, as I mentioned, the cecum, the large colon and the small colon, we know that this is the fermentation vat of the horse. This is where the microbial population lives. So we know this. We also know that there are bare minimum amounts of forage that a horse must eat in a day in order to maintain either just overall health or to maintain performance. We know that 1% of their body weight, so 10 pounds of forage for a 1,000-pound horse, this is 10 pounds of dry forage. We know that is the absolute bare minimum to keep the gut functioning. Typically, horses that are overweight on a weight loss program are going to eat around 1.2% of their body, but most of our horses should be eating between 1.5 to 2.5% of their body weight in dry forage per day. We know these numbers. So we know the numbers. We know the parts of the digestive system. We know that the horse needs fiber, but why? We know gut health can affect many functions in the horse, but how? And that's what we're going to dig into a little bit more with this gut microbiome. We want to take a closer look at what's actually going on in the hindgut of the horse. So let's start with this key word that we're hearing a lot these days, the microbiome. What is a microbiome? A microbiome is the community of microorganisms living together in a particular habitat. Humans, animals, and plants have their own unique microbiomes. The equine gut microbiome refers to all of the microbes in the hindgut, which act as another organ. There are so many there, and they work together that they actually act as another organ. And it's crucial for the health of the horse. The gut microbiome plays important roles in harvesting and extracting those nutrients and energy from the diet, resisting the colonization from bad bacteria and pathogens. They develop the immune system, and they also detoxify bad compounds that come into the host. Now we know that the digestive system is part of the immune system, and we know that the digestive system extracts nutrients, but we're going to dig deeper into it's the microbiome that is actually responsible for those things. So what does the microbiome in the horse's gut actually consist of? Well, it consists of bacteria, fungi, another word for those are yeast, protozoa, viruses. You say, well, viruses are bad. We don't want viruses. There are good viruses as well. And archaea, I always get that word wrong, but microbes. Just to put it in perspective, how many microbes are actually in the hindgut of the horse? We know that our body has millions of cells, trillions of cells. The microbes in our body outnumber the cells by 10 to 1. So we have a significant amount of microbes just living right there in that hindgut. So what things externally to the horse can affect the microbiome? The lifestyle your horse leads. We know that certain types of performance can be stressful to horses. We know that the environment that they live in, do they live in stalls? Do they live out in paddocks? The dietary patterns, are they eating once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day? Do they have any kind of gastrointestinal upset or distress? Dietary changes, changing from all forage diet to a grain-based diet, or changing the different types of grain or hay you're feeding. Hindgut acidosis, laminitis, colic, all of these things are external factors that can affect the gut microbiome. And this is all being scientifically researched in humans, in other animals, and in horses. So don't be afraid by these scientific papers. Really, I'm trying to build a story here on, I want to show you how we have changed the microbiome based on the things we do with our horses. So it makes sense, go back to the very beginning and look at the domestication of horses and how did that change the microbiome. So this group actually looked at domestication versus those horses living in the wild. So these are Mongolian horses, either raised in a zoo, or those two other words, Villeray and Sia, are two wild reserves one's in France and one's in Mongolia. And research have determined that these horses are wild horses. They have not been domesticated. And what we're looking at in this graph is we're looking at gut microbial diversity. So we're looking at the diversity of the gut microbiome. You can see the horses that were raised in a zoo, so these domesticated horses, that rectangle is really, really narrow. That is showing us that their gut microbial diversity is very small, versus the other two groups have a much wider microbial diversity. Microbial diversity is important, significantly stunted in these animals born in a zoo. So that's just kind of a little glimpse at comparing domestic versus wild animals. So let's go a little bit further now and look at horses in the same climatic conditions, but housed in two different styles. So this study was done in Mongolia, and there were Mongolian horses living out. It was 2 farms in Mongolia. So I want to emphasize all horses were living in Mongolia. One group of Mongolian horses living more wild lifestyle out on the prairies, and then thoroughbred horses living in stalls, all under the same climatic conditions, but the thoroughbreds were living in stalls, eating more typical diets that racehorses would eat, hay and grain, versus the ponies that were out on the prairies. Now, you're going to hear these two types of bacteria referenced a lot. Firmicutes, represented in that top 2 pie graphs by the blue, and Bacteroides, represented by the dark green. Now, they are the 2 most predominant bacteria species in horses, no matter where they're living. These should be the 2 most predominant species. But when we start to break those groups down is when we started to see differences. So, as previously reported in other studies, this study also showed that firmicutes were the predominant bacteria. Okay, We also, as in previous studies, showed that Bacteroides were the second most predominant bacteria. Bacteroides are responsible for breaking down carbohydrates and non-digestible carbohydrates. What was different, though? This proteobacteria was significantly different in the two breeds. 1% in the Mongolian horses and 4% in the thoroughbred horses. Well, what are these proteobacteria, she says? They're pathogenic bacteria. Many of these proteobacteria are pathogenic bacteria like Salmonella. So the Mongolian horses had much less pathogenic bacteria than the thoroughbred horses. Now, I don't want to say that that's necessarily a breed difference, but more a lifestyle difference, how these horses were living. Streptococcus as well was 3% for the thoroughbred horses and less than 1% for the Mongolian horses. We know that Streptococcus can cause a lot of different disorders in horses. It's a pathogenic bacteria. So, are thoroughbred horses more susceptible to disease, or is it really the lifestyle of these two horses? When you put them out in the fields and they are grazing, not as exposed to all of the bacteria in their environment, who knows? I'm showing you this just to start building a picture of what's healthy and what we've changed by how we change horses. So now let's dig a little deeper into some of the actual physical states of our horses. Let's look at lean and obese horses. And now these two groupings of bar charts are showing, again, those two most common bacteria, the Bacteroides and the Firmicutes. And you can see in the normal horses, Bacteroides, and in the Firmicutes there, the green bars. When the horses get obese, though, we're looking at the blue bars. Bacteroides decrease and Firmicutes increase in obese horses. This is similar to research we've seen in humans. Human obesity has been associated with the reduced proportions of Bacteroides and corresponding increased abundance of Firmicutes. Human obesity is associated with a reduction in insulin sensitivity, just like it is in horses, and in turn, reduced insulin sensitivity has been associated with decreased microbial diversity. Remember, we looked at the first slide and we looked at those zoo animals versus the animals in the wild, and microbial diversity is really important. So obesity and decreased insulin sensitivity decreases microbial diversity, and it changes the proportion of Bacteroides and Firmicutes. So we've all had easy keepers and hard keepers, right? Well, this group actually looked at, is there actually a microbial difference between easy keepers and hard keepers? We tend to always put it down to genetics, but maybe there's a little bit more to it. So I'm going to turn it over to Katie for a poll question.
Thank you, Dr. Cubitt. So our first polling question is, I own or care for a horse that is a hard keeper, so they're hard to keep weight on, medium keeper, they do just right, or easy keeper, and they pack the pounds on pretty easily. So this question can have multiple answers selected. So if you have more than one horse that fits into any of these categories, go ahead and check any that apply, and then click submit. And a reminder, your specific answer won't be seen by any of the other attendees, but we will view the total responses together once the poll is closed. Okay, it looks like about 70% of you have voted. If you haven't had a chance to vote yet, go ahead and do that now so we can close the poll. All right, we will close this now, and I want to share with you guys the results. So we have 68% of the attendees have easy keeper horses, 54% have medium keeper, and 49% have hard keeper horses. And I will go ahead and hand this back over to Dr. Cubitt now.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Katie. So everybody has had experience with one or many of these different types of horses. So what this group found was, again, let's go back to that microbial diversity. The horses that were hard keepers, hard to maintain their body weight, they had the least bacterial diversity, followed by the easy keepers. But the medium keepers, they added in this medium keeper group, they had the most bacterial diversity. The hard keepers had less lactic acid producing bacteria. Now, they're the bacteria that break down carbohydrates, turn it into energy. They also had less amino acid utilizing bacteria. They are the bacteria that are breaking down protein. A lot of these horses that are hard keepers don't have great top lines. Maybe this is part of it. And the medium keepers were the most efficient at nutrient digestion. So this reduced bacterial diversity is coming, it is raising its head again and again with either obesity, captive animals, and these hard keeper or easy keeper animals. So again, microbial diversity, richness is really important. Now let's look at changing the diet of horses. We've looked at horses that were primarily eating a lot of forage. Now let's look at when we add things to the diet. So this study had two parts to it. They had adult versus elderly. So the adult horses were in the 5 to 12 age range, and the elderly horses were 19 to 28 years old. And they fed them 3 different diets, either a hay only with a pretty low NSC, non-structural carbohydrate content, around 11%, and pretty low fat, around 4%. Then they added carbohydrates to this hay, and the carbohydrate content of the total diet was then around 42%. So we're right up looking at a racehorse diet here, but still with low fat. And then they took that base hay diet and they added fat to it. So we're now looking at 13% NSCs, but around 8.5% fat. And what they found, so now we'll dig a little deeper into this microbiome. In the center of a microbiome is what we call a core community. It is the strength in the center of that microbiome, okay? And it's really important to have a strong core community. In the hay-only diet, that core community represented 15.9%. When we start adding other things that these bacteria aren't necessarily used to breaking down, we start to decrease that. Oil in the diet decreased by this core community by 10.3%. Adding those significant amount of carbohydrates, as you would see in a racehorse diet, really decreased that core community by 5.4 to 5.4%. Okay, so what is one of the most predominant bacteria in this core community? You don't have to remember this name, but it's a bacteria called Lactospiraceae. Lactospiraceae are known to produce butyrate. Butyrate is a volatile fatty acid that is responsible. So it's made in the hindgut by bacteria, by these good bacteria, and it has protective function in the gut wall. So butyrate helps the cells on the intestinal wall stay strong and stay healthy. It's this protective function. And we found that as we decrease that core community, you're decreasing the amount of Lactospiraceae. Okay, so what are the problems we see over and over in horses that eat high grain diets? Colic, digestive upset, diarrhea, breakdown in that hindgut. Okay, what we also noticed was the microbiome significantly was reduced in the older horses. So the microbial diversity was much less in the older horses. What that says to me is older horses, we need to make sure that we're feeding them sources of fiber that they can digest, really high quality sources of fiber, because a lot of these older horses are losing weight, losing top line. Maybe we're needing to add different dietary aids that can help them break down that fiber. And racehorses, I mean, we're not going to stop feeding racehorses high carbohydrate diets, but what can we add to the diet? What can we encourage trainers to feed to help boost that core community? That is the goal that we need to get to. So looking here, we're looking at a healthy gut. If we think about the gut lining is made of these healthy cells, and in between those cells are things called tight junctions. And in a healthy digestive tract, these tight junctions stay closed and they only open to allow properly digested food particles through. But if we look at a damaged gut lining, one with very little butyrate production, perhaps one that's got very low lactospiraceae levels, then we see that those tight junctions are damaged and we have non-digested food and bacteria leaking into the bloodstream, causing all kinds of problems in our horses. So I want to turn it over to Katie for another poll question.
Thank you. So our next poll question is, have you owned or cared for a horse with colic, laminitis, or other metabolic disorders? Pretty simple on this one. Just select yes or no, and then click submit. Awesome. So we have about 70% have voted. If you guys wouldn't mind just finishing up, and we'll close the poll. Okay, let's close this up now and share the responses with everyone. So 73% have said yes, they have owned or cared for a horse with any of those kind of disorders. 27% have said no. And go ahead, Dr. Cubitt, you may continue.
Thank you, Katie. So it's really interesting. You know, the majority of you have dealt with a horse with one of these issues, and potentially the microbiome is at play with those issues. So we'll keep on going. So I want to show you now a study that was done at a vet hospital looking at the microbiome in horses that presented with colitis, so hindgut inflammation and damage. So they had healthy horses and then those that presented with colitis. And you can again see in the healthy horses, we have a lot of firmicutes. About nearly 70% of the bacteria are firmicutes. But when those horses present with colitis, they've only got about 30% firmicutes and a lot more Bacteroides. Now, when we break down the firmicutes, that's where those lactospiraceae sit. They sit in the firmicutes phylum. Okay, so we said the lactospiraceae, they produce butyrate. Butyrate's really important for healthy gut lining. These horses don't have a healthy gut lining, and it's showing here that maybe there's a role of these firmicutes. Maybe that the firmicute decrease is having a huge role in this damaged gut lining. So maybe we go back a step, and what is affecting the firmicutes? Was it the diet these horses were being fed? Was it the environment they were living in? You know, there's so many things at play here, but previous studies showed that lactospiraceae were the highest in horses eating high forage diets. So we always come back to that. What are horses designed to do? They are designed as non-ruminant herbivores that eat wide varieties of forages. And when we have that high forage diet, they really do have the best bacterial populations. Let's look at metabolic syndrome. Now let's take away diet. Let's actually just look at the hormonal issues in a horse, and can that alone, without diet, affect the equine microbiome? So they looked at 10 horses with equine metabolic syndrome and 10 controls. Now, equine metabolic syndrome was determined by elevated body weight, elevated crusty neck score, and basal insulin and post-oral sugar test insulin. So the control horses, now these horses were all eating the same forage diet, but they presented with either equine metabolic syndrome or control. The control horses, again, had a much wider microbial diversity, and the horses with equine metabolic syndrome had a much more narrow microbial diversity. Typically, the next step with equine metabolic syndrome is this chronic laminitis. And again, we looked at this group of horses, 10 were normal, 8 with laminitis. Controls showing us these normal horses and the horses with laminitis on the right-hand side. And again, the firmicutes are significantly decreased in the horses with laminitis. Now, I know we mentioned in the very beginning, and when we mentioned in the overview for this talk, behavior. And I could spend an hour just talking about the gut-brain axis and how behavior is affected by the things that we eat. Any of you that have children know that what you feed your children can affect their behavior, and it's the same with horses. And there have been research studies after research studies looking at what we feed horses and how it can change their behavior. Feed high non-structural carbohydrates, and it can cause a horse to be hotter or more flighty. And there are research studies that have gone down to the microbiome level and can correlate that to a change in the different type of bacteria that are predominant in the gut. So increased healthy, let's look at the left-hand side. A healthy animal has normal gut microbes, healthy levels of inflammation and inflammatory mediators, and that goes through the gut-brain barrier, and we have a healthy central nervous system. But when we have abnormal gut function, we have this uneven levels of bacteria. This causes inflammation and inflammatory markers, and that goes through the gut-brain barrier and can actually affect the central nervous system. So there's a huge connection there. I just don't have enough time to really talk a lot about it today, but if you have more questions on this, do at the end ask them. So what can we do for these horses? We need to focus on feeding the microbiome. I am a holistic approach person. I like to feed the whole horse and not just the feet, and not just the coat, and not just feed for speed. But I think that if I'm going to get specific, it would be feeding the microbiome, because the microbiome is what's affecting all of those other things. We need to use feeding strategies that promote a healthy microbiome and discourage these pathogenic bacteria. We know there's a link between nutrition and health, and now we know that link is the gut microbiome. We're learning more and more about the gut microbiome, but we know it is the link. It is what makes a horse healthy or unhealthy. So I come back to this amount of forage. We know that horses need to eat between 1.5 to 2.5% of body weight. And I hope now you have a better understanding of why, not just because it's written in some textbook and not just because I said. So in summary, we need high quality forage. We need to provide it consistently. We need to always go back to what is the horse designed to do. We need to utilize feeding management practices that favor that microbiome. Research is ongoing. There is really good research in other additives. So I want to give you an example. I live out here in the East Coast. I live in Virginia, and I work with a lot of clients on the East Coast. And we unfortunately don't have the best local hay. And that's just due to climatic conditions. Last year it rained and rained and rained, and so we didn't have great hay. And this year we've had a lot of drought conditions. So we don't have the best hay growing conditions on the East Coast. So we find ourselves feeding more and more grain in order to maintain body weight or performance. But in doing that, then we're compromising the microbiome, increasing those carbohydrate producing bacteria, increasing the pathogenic bacteria. So we need to find ways. This is why Standlee Premium Western Forage is an excellent option, because you can get it all around the country. And so putting a little more money into your hay budget will really go a long way. So with that, I really hope that wasn't too sciencey and you got some information out of it, but please flood us with your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cubitt. This has been some great insight into what's happening with our horse's gut microbiome. I know there's still so much to learn about this, but it's really beneficial to hear what equine professionals have learned so far. So just a reminder to everyone, go ahead and download the quick fact sheet that's available under handouts before we end the webinar today. And we'll also be doing the drawing for free product coupons following the Q&A session. So let's go ahead and get started on some questions that were submitted so far today. Again, please feel free to keep bringing those questions in, and we will address as many of them as we can. So, Dr. Cubitt, our first question is from Stephanie, and she would like to know, can a domesticated horse develop a more diverse microbiome, or is this basically what we've done to our equines?
This is a great question, and I I believe yes. I believe we have the tools that we can increase the gut microbiome again. I think we're doing the research in different forage sources, different forage types. I think we're doing the research on different probiotics and prebiotics. So probiotics are going to actually feed the host. They're things like yeast, different bacteria that we're going to add to the diet. And prebiotics, a classic prebiotic that a lot of people overlook is actually beet pulp. And beet pulp are also, they're going to feed the bacteria. So I think that we are doing more research into these different supplements, because to date, really, you know, you can go into the store and there is a whole myriad of different supplements, digestive supplements out there. And are they really what they say they are? Do they actually have enough of whatever is touted to do any benefit? But we're really doing a lot more research. I think there is some real value to Saccharomyces cerevisiae, which is a yeast, but the first thing that we can all do is feed a more forage-based diet. Even if you have a racehorse, you can feed a racehorse a forage-based diet. It's got to be brilliant forage, the highest quality alfalfa you can find, but you can give a racehorse enough calories to maintain body weight at the most peak level of competition. So I think if we, and I work with a lot of different companies. I have to recommend grains as well, but I think for all of us, our goal is the betterment of the horse, and we need to feed a more forage-based diet.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Cubitt. Our next question is from Kelly, and Kelly would like to know, is there a change in microbiome makeup of PPID horses?
So PPID is Cushing. So yes, that equine metabolic syndrome. I have not seen a specific study, not saying that there isn't one, that directly looks at Cushing's, but I would say it would mirror what we're seeing with those equine metabolic syndrome horses, so decreased microbial diversity. So what that shows me is there are specific groups of horses that are more in need of good quality forage and digestive aids, and they would be the horses with metabolic syndrome, with PPID, your aged horses, horses that live predominantly in stalls.
Okay, interesting. Our next question we have is from Danielle. Danielle's question is, could these damaged cell junctions be caused by ulcers?
You know, that's a great question, because this is a whole nother topic that I discuss with my clients, and it's all about leaky gut and cause and effect. Gastric ulcers causing leaky gut, or is the leaky gut and the breakdown of those tight junctions causing gastric ulcers? I definitely think they go hand in hand. Horses with leaky gut, which is that hind gut breakdown, they pretty much 100% of the time present with gastric ulcers, and we do the GastroGuard, UlcerGuard type products, and as soon as we take them away, the problems immediately bounce back. So I definitely think these hind gut issues, and maybe it's something to do with the inflammation. The hind gut microbiome, when it's damaged, causes inflammation. Inflammation is the root of all bad things that ever happen, and maybe that inflammation is carrying over into the stomach, or, you know, I'm guessing, but I think that these are good guesses.
Okay. Let's see. Danielle threw in another question there too right away. So my senior draft horses are on pasture 24/7, have teff hay access 24/7, and eat beet pulp soaked with alfalfa Timothy cubes. No grain. What else can I feed to keep the microbiome stable?
You know, I think you're doing a great job already. They're not in stalls, they're eating pasture. I think one of the things that we should also think about when we're maybe we're reestablishing pastures. A lot of people ask me, what is the best horse pasture? And in the past, the best horse pasture mixes were our cool season grasses that withstood trampling and were really robust. Well, what made them robust was their increased carbohydrate content, which we know now is not great for horses. So we're also doing a lot of research in warm season grasses and more of our native grasses and finding those grasses that actually withstand the pressures of horses. It also comes down to not putting too many horses in your field so that you overwhelm them with manure and you really chew down that forage too quickly. So you're doing a great job. You've got a variety, hopefully a variety of different grass and plant species, forbs as well, in your field. You're feeding teff hay, which is a low carb hay. Standlee has a teff hay option now. You're not, and I'm not saying that feeding grain to horses is bad. There are classes of horses that need grain, but if we're going to do that to horses, we need to make sure we manage it well. We need to feed small meals often, then we need to make sure we're adding supplements that help the horse break down, help the horse overcome some of the pitfalls associated with feeding grain. But right now, I think you're doing a great job.
Excellent. And I will add that the teff hay is not quite available, but
Sorry.
nope, you're good. Keep a lookout though. And let's see, Karen says, I have a horse with gastric ulcers. What can I do for her microbiome?
So you've got a horse with gastric ulcers. So it comes back to the management of the horse. I want you to try and make sure she's got forage in front of her 24/7, adding in higher quality forage sources. Now I'm just making assumptions because maybe you've already done some of these things. Higher quality forage sources like adding in alfalfa. Alfalfa is going to give you calcium to help buffer that stomach acid, but it's also going to give you more calories so that we can cut back on the amount of grain. Adding a yeast-based digestive supplement would be beneficial. We know that if you need more calories, I know adding oil, it did show that it decreased the core community, but sometimes that's the lesser of all evils. You know, adding more grain for calories is worse than adding calories from fat. But I think making sure, one of the first things that we tend to do is sometimes when we're putting horses on weight loss program or cutting back is cut back on the forage, and it's really the last place we should cut back. So a lot of times we find obese horses, we put them on a weight loss program, we're really cutting back on the forage because we can't cut back on anything else because they're really getting no grain, and then we just trade one problem for another. We get their body weight under control, but now we've given them gastric ulcers because we didn't feed them enough forage. So
Okay.
I know these answers are all seeming pretty basic, but it's more the connection. It's more enlightening us to a little bit more of why these things should be done.
Excellent. Let's see. Karen would like to know, says, my 16-year-old mare, who is very healthy, had a colic incident last week. Never had any problems before. Does this mean her gut is damaged? The vet has her on a strict refeeding program.
It all depends on the type of colic that she had and the cause of that colic. You know, there are 101 million different ways horses get colic or reasons why they get colic. So if it wasn't feed related, then, you know, it maybe wasn't a damage in the gut that caused it. Definitely, if she had a colic, there was inflammation and distress associated, so that will have affected the microbiome. So she should be on some kind of follow-up probiotic, prebiotic supplement. And we also find we know that that tissue might be damaged, so feeding long stem hay can be a little abrasive, and so feeding a finer source of fiber. So this is where going to some of your pelleted forage that's a little finer, a little less abrasive, is good in short term for these horses. Now, I really don't like to feed 100% pelleted forage all the time. I really like to have some long stem forage in there, but there are cases where I do need to add more pellets. Now, I do like to add pellets as a complement, part of the diet, but I don't like to feed 100% of their fiber coming from pelleted forage. But with that particular horse, I'd say yes, there's been some damage, there's been some inflammation, but with the right management, you can fix it.
Okay. Diane would like to know, is there anything I can do to support the health of my 33-year-old horse's microbiome when he gets fed twice a day via a mash of beet pulp, alfalfa pellets, and senior feed?
First thing I would do is I would feed him 5 times a day. I would feed and make sure that he's eating continually throughout the day instead of 2 meals, just to mimic that more natural grazing behavior.
Okay,
By
and
doing
just,
that, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, just to kind of play a little bit of a devil's advocate here. So 5 times a day, what can Diane do if maybe she doesn't have the ability to feed 5 times a day?
A lot of old horses eat pretty slowly anyway, so feeding, almost ad lib feeding them, putting it into larger quantities. There are different slow feeder options that slow them down, that are big buckets that maybe have little wells in the bottom. We talk about slow feeders for hay, but they're great for senior horses as well. The actual grain feed option, slow feeder option, so that you can put more in there and they'll just slowly nibble away at it, because I know that, you know, it's very time costly to feed them five times a day. But if we can find a way that he can just kind of self-regulate, that would be the most ideal.
Okay, thank you. Kelly would like to know how to increase forage variety in chronic laminitic horse when vets usually recommend that horse stays on a quote unquote dry lot and away from forage.
They need to eat forage, because if you don't feed them forage, you are going to trade one problem for another, and it will be a vicious cycle of problem after problem after problem. So we absolutely need to feed those horses forage. You need to feed the right forages. And again, ideal situation is feeding multiple sources of forage. But in a situation like this, let's just say we've got a local hay grower and we've had the hay tested and it's a Timothy hay. Then if that's low enough in carbohydrates, then for the short term, that's all the horse is going to get. A lot of our local grass hays, though, most of our fields are not monocultures. They're not just one type of grass. So you're going to get a variety of forages in a local grass hay. It really is important that we find a low carbohydrate hay and you give those horses 24-hour access. Now, that being said, if we have a horse on a weight loss program, that 1.2% of body weight, this is where management becomes very intensive. And we want to make sure that we're feeding that. Let's say we've got a 1,000-pound horse and we're feeding him 12 pounds of forage per day. This is where we need to utilize slow feeders and slow hay nets and whatever we can, so that he is just constantly nibbling away on that 12 pounds of hay, and we're not just throwing it out in 2 meals and he's gobbling it down and standing around for the rest of the time. So no one should be telling you your horse should not eat forage, should not eat high carbohydrate forage, but absolutely they need forage, or as I said, you'll trade one problem for another.
Thanks, Dr. Cubitt. Karen would like to know, is there any type of hay that is best? For example, Coastal, Timothy, Tifton.
You know, I think that I would go out on a limb and say that our more, if you're not doing a lot of exercise with your horse, if we've got more maintenance horses and they don't need a high calorie hay, than your more warm season native grasses because they're not going to be high in carbohydrates. But again, if we've got our racehorses or eventers or barrel racers and we're trying to feed them a higher nutrient dense hay, and they need those carbohydrates for the types of, because you got to think about it. We can't take the horse completely out of what his wild environment was, also him just roaming and grazing. Now we want to ride him, and we want to do excessive amounts of exercise with him that wasn't natural to the horse in the wild. So there's only so much of that wild diet that we can do and still maintain the exercise level or the performance level that you want. So if we have these high performing horses that need the carbohydrates, the amount of exercise that we're expecting them to do, then I would much prefer they get that from a high carb hay than a bunch of grain. So.
Okay, and then so for example, for anyone who may be unfamiliar with warm season grasses, just the specific term, can you give some examples for the maintenance horses that would be
so
warm
your
season
coastal
grasses?
Bermuda grass hay or different Bermuda grass species are varieties of warm season grasses. Some of your turf grass species are warm season grasses.
Okay. So let's see. Does the stem length of the forage make a difference? For example, hay pellets versus hay cubes versus baled hay?
It really, digestively in cattle, yes, fiber length makes a huge difference for the gut microbiome. And in horses, research has shown a direct influence on the gut microbiome is negligent with the different fiber lengths, but where it does make a difference is typically horses consume pelleted or cubed forage with a shorter fiber length much quicker than they do long stem hay. So it's more about the amount of acid that will be produced in the stomach when they're standing around because they've eaten their pellets really quickly. And the lack of saliva that they're producing because they're chewing less when they chew pellets or cubes. So.
Okay. So we went a little bit extra over time, but we're going to throw in one more question. And this is from Jay. Jay would like to know leaky gut as a cause for thin soles. Can that be a cause?
That might be a stretch. I would say thin soles are definitely more of a genetic issue. But if you buy a horse that has really good quality hooves and then it slowly deteriorates and you've got other symptoms as well, then certainly I think leaky gut and this hind gut breakdown could play a role in the breakdown of hooves. But thin soles is more like some people have thin hair versus some people have thick hair. It's more of a genetic trait.
Okay, perfect. So thank you, Dr. Cubitt, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. We really appreciate your time and interest in wanting to learn more about nutrition for your animals. But before we wrap up, we will go ahead and announce our winner of free product coupons right now. And the winner is Danielle Summerfield. So congratulations. We will email you to get mailing information for sending the coupons out to you. If you have any other questions that weren't answered today during the presentation, please contact Standlee's customer relations team. The phone number and email are available on this final slide. You can find past webinars, more nutritional white papers, and other great information, including the Standlee Barn Bulletin blog and some great tools to help identify what type of forage is best for your horse and how to optimize their diet on our website at standleeforage.com. Some of our previous webinar presentations have included beet pulp. What is it and why do horses need it? When quality hay is in short supply, what can I feed my horse? Should I be concerned about feeding alfalfa? And many other great topics. So if you have not had a chance to check those recordings out, please go over there and visit when you have a chance. And then also, when you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would really appreciate if you could complete that for us. Your feedback helps us to create better webinars for you and nutritional content, and helps us to identify some great topics for future webinars. You will also receive a follow-up email within about 24 to 48 hours or so with a link to view the recording of today's webinar, just in case you'd like to go back and reference what we discussed today. And the recording should be available for about a week following the webinar, and then it will be available on our website under nutritional resources, along with the other ones that are archived there. So on behalf of Standlee Premium Western Forage and Dr. Cubitt, thank you so much for joining us for this webinar, and we hope that you have a great rest of your week.